then bring it on up to the present time. Just the historical here is what we want. We don't ask any personal questions. How did you meet your wife? And so on and so forth. That's your business, not ours.
Okay, what's your full name?
John D. Marston.
John D. How do you spell last name?
M-A-R-S-T-O-N.
Marston. Okay. This is November 24th, 1987. This is Joe, Todd, and Berenice Jackson, an interview with John D. Marston in Woodward, and we're in your store, John D's.
John D's. Been here 36 years.
Been here 36 years.
When I first moved out here, all that across the street was a wheat field.
Where were you born?
When?
When and where?
At Woodward, Oklahoma.
And when's your birthday?
March 17, 27.
1927. Who's your father?
Milton Marston. He's 86 years old.
Does he live here in Woodward?
Yeah, he's after my mother died, he married another lady from Amarillo. He stays in Amarillo quite a bit of time. He had a stroke here about 5 or 6 weeks ago. Well, first had a little light heart attack, and then he was in the hospital about 3 days and had a light stroke that affected his mind and his speech, but not his legs or arms or anything like that. But just left him where his speech is. Well, he'll make some sentences and it'll be all right. Then he'll go right into something that say words you never heard of before in your life.
Well.
But he can get along right and get dressed and shaves himself.
Take care of himself.
He was sheriff here for about 14 years.
Oh, he was.
Who was your mother?
Opal Marston.
What was her maiden name?
Wager.
W-A-G-E-R. And where were your folks from?
Well, around this area. My dad was born west of I-7 Harmon.
And your mother this area too?
Yeah.
And your father was rancher?
No, him and Hubert Judy worked on the Railway Ice Company. Dad was older than Hubert, but Judy worked with him off hours in the wintertime, and in the summertime they delivered ice together when Hubert was in school, high school. And then he went into later in the police work and worked on the police force for several years, and then the sheriff for 14 years.
Oh. When'd you start school?
What year?
Yep.
Gosh, I don't remember.
And what was the name of the school?
It was Northward. Northward, called Northward then. So
Northward?
Well, that's at school north of town, which I don't even know what to call it now. It was a two-room school.
And so your folks lived in Woodward?
Lived right in town.
Yeah. What did Woodward look like in those years? What did Main Street look like in the 30s?
Well, it was about kind of similar to what it is now. It hasn't changed really a whole lot in the last 50 years. Yeah. Actually, as a matter of fact, some of the same businesses down there, Trigo's and Oliver's, was there when I was a little old kid. Star Model was there, so it hasn't really changed a whole lot until the last few years, until they've got a lot of vacant buildings now, of course. But that was kind of the hub of the whole. On Saturday nights, everybody, in smaller towns all went to town. I remember my dad used to go down early and park the car in front of Marson Grocery so they could sit there all evening and watch people go, and I knew everybody in town. And we'd sit there till probably 10:30, just to visit and go shopping for groceries.
And they have dances here in town on Saturday nights.
Yeah, I never did go to any, but I suppose I suppose it did. I don't remember it.
How bad were the dust storms in Woodward in the 30s?
Well, I remember that Black Sunday. I was probably a few years old, 3 or 4 or 5. I remember that. Remember it rolling in, but I don't remember just exactly how bad it was. But I do know that after I started in business out here in the 50s, they had some that would just, you couldn't even see cars going up and down the highway out there.
Now, there was a big drought here in the 50s, about as bad as the 30s.
About as bad. You could see cars going up and down the highway, and it just looked like someone had a little one-cell flashlight moving down, you know, in that middle afternoon. So it wasn't bad as the 30s, but it was bad enough. It was about 5 years it didn't rain there.
And did you go through high school?
No, I got patriotic and, like I was telling you, joined the Navy.
What year did you join?
I believe it was 42. 3, that's so long, I don't even remember it. 42 or 3. Stayed in 2 years, 2 months, and 22 days. I do remember that.
Where did you go to boot camp?
San Diego.
Tell me about boot camp.
Well, that was a new experience for me. It's just something you got to go through to really enjoy it. Of course, we only had 4 weeks then because they was during a war deal and they was pushed in as fast as they could through there.
What were you trained to be?
Well, I worked as a baker. Worked in the bakery here before I went in. So when I went in there, I went in as a baker and went to Cooks and Baker School. That was a 16-week course, I think. So I was a baker in the Navy.
After boot camp, where'd you go?
Well, we went to firefighting school in Treasure Island for about a month.
And what'd you do in firefighting school?
Well, they had those simulated ships set up with the catwalks, and they'd pour gasoline on that water and set it afire, and we'd go in there with the fog hoses and put the fire out, you know, kind of simulated what it would be like on a ship.
And from there, where'd you go?
Went aboard the U.S.S. Ward, a destroyer at San Pedro, California. And it was a brand new ship, and we commissioned it.
Have a shakedown cruise?
Yeah.
What do you do in a shakedown cruise?
That's kind of an experience. I'd worked all night before in the bakery, and I slept in the aft part of the ship. And you know, they had 3 tiers of bunks, and I was in the middle one. Well, that day they had a full speed ahead and reversed the ship to test it, see if it'd hold together. And I tell you what, I was in that middle bunk, and I just from the middle to the top bunks, I just going like that. You know, it brought the whole back of that ship out of the water. And of course, just popping like back. It was a twin screw type ship, and it was pretty fast. Do 45 knots a mile an eighth.
Yep.
So it was pretty fast. So it was full speed ahead and then reversed. So you can imagine what kind of an excursion that was.
Destroyer?
Yeah.
And how long does shakedown cruise last?
Oh, we went out every day for, I don't know, 8 or 10 days. We'd put it through different maneuvers. It was a new ship, and it just had to be some things, kinks worked out of it. Kind of like buying a new car, you know, you have to take it back every day for a year.
Okay. Would you tell me basically what a destroyer is supposed to do?
Well, we have done a lot of escort work, you know, in freighters or troop carriers, or we was fast and we could maneuver around, stay out to the edges of them and protect them. And after we got overseas, we followed mine sweeps. You know, they'd had those cables on those pontoons, and they'd hook those mines and clip them, and we'd just shoot them when they come to top.
You go to the South Pacific?
Yeah.
Where'd you go?
Oh, we was all over those islands at different times, and Guam was in out of Guam. Of course, we never did. About all of our stores and ammunition was, as a rule, was taken on at sea, so we stayed at sea most of the time.
And where was your first combat?
Okinawa was really, we was in Okinawa, well, that's where we was following mine sweeps. We was in close enough following mine sweeps, we could see gun emplacements right there on the island. You know, the north end had those cliffs. They even had guns mounted on tracks that they could pull out and fire and pull back. Anyway, we was following those mine sweeps, and we'd see gun emplacements, and we'd radio to the planes overhead, and they'd fly down and blow them up. And there never was a shot fired on our side of the island. And we was there for a week or 10 days.
How come no shots were fired?
They wouldn't even fire back. So I thought, you know, not knowing anything about what was happening, I thought we'd just go ahead and go right on in there and take it without any problem at all. But the morning of that invasion, I'll guarantee you that place was alive.
What happened?
It just, there were a hole and tree, and there had somebody behind it firing back. It was a pretty bloody morning.
What'd you do in the invasion?
We sat back about, we had 5-inch guns on our destroyer. We sat back out there several miles and just blasted into it. But they had the Army and Marines, you know, they went in them little amphibious and hit the beach. And we lost a lot of men. But we had some battle wagons that sat way back out at the 16-inch and lobbed them in. But it was probably one of the toughest battles out there.
How long did the invasion last?
I don't remember. It's been so many years ago.
And what exactly were you doing on board the ship during the invasion?
Well, I was in Repair 2, firefighting unit. You know, when it was at General Quarters. And then after the...
what do you do at Repair 2? What's that?
Well, we was at the midship, and we had those handy bellies, you know, that crank those engines and throw a suction hose over the side and pull the ocean water out and shoot it through about 3-inch lines to put out fires.
Okay.
And during the invasion of Okinawa, we didn't get hit there. Had some close calls, but we didn't get hit till later.
And where were you hit?
We was on picket duty between Okinawa and Japan.
Now what's picket duty?
Well, that's, you go out there and you intercept. Well, you know, they was getting kind of down to the end of the war right then. And they'd send them Jap suicides out every evening to head towards, usually they tried to get some of those that like Okinawa and catch ships that, you know, around that area and attack them. So we was on picket duty, and we'd sit out there and pick it. We had some of the top radar at that time. And we'd pick them up and radio back to Okinawa for them to get ready for an invasion, for a raid. But it got to where they didn't even want to bother about going on in. They just started picking off the picket ships. And that's where we got hit. We took 9 suicides and 3 bombs.
What happened?
It just about leveled her off. I'm in the superstructure.
How big is superstructure on the destroyer?
Oh, I don't know. It's the top, the front stack was still left. The back one, and from there on, it was just flat. It took all that out.
And where were you when you were first hit by kamikaze?
Well, in the midship.
Midship, was that down?
Well, I'm in midship. I mean, that'd be the center part. I was on top deck. It's firefighting. You know.
Firefighting. That again.
That was, see, we had general quarters every time the radio would pick up those planes. Well, we had to go to general quarters, and that was my general quarter station.
Okay, and you're a midship, and were you up on deck or were you below deck?
I was on the main deck.
And again, were you with the engines that were pulling the seawater in to put fires out?
Well, we had those handy-billies, and they were just little old gasoline engines, you know, that we used to put fires out. The first suicide that came in, the gunners shot it down, and the engines, the engine off this, it was a single-engine suicide. It was either valve or a Zeke. Ricocheted off the water and lodged between the main deck and the gun turret, which is about like that. It just melded itself in there. So that gun turret couldn't turn. It was a twin 5-inch gun. And so they could only elevate the guns this way, but they couldn't turn this way. And that was number 3. I was on the aft part of the ship. And that was the first one. Then the second one come in, and it seemed like there was, you'd hear the 5 inches going, then the 40 millimeters. But then time them 20s started, you better start getting shelter over your head, because they're getting within a few feet. And it seemed like they would just get them things to burning good and hit the ship.
Did you see that one hit the ship?
Yeah, I've seen several of them hit the ship.
What were you doing?
Well, it was
Besides running?
Well, from side to side, trying to stay under some shelter. I got pinned down on a mine track. We was a mine layer too. And a mine track, and the plane went through, and the deal fell on my leg, and I laid there looking up at the sky while about 3 of them come in. And it was, it got a little bit warm there. They had fires, you know, going underneath me there in those fire rooms where the bombs, the planes went through and exploded with the bombs on. And they had fires going in there, and but luckily I had this hose with me to put out a fire, and they cut the hose. Then the ship would roll this way. Well, that old deck was just steaming hot. But when the ship would roll back a little bit, that cool water would roll back. I was glad the ship would roll back. And so I lay there for a while, and also while I was laying there, we was out the U.S.S. Little. It was another destroyer. It was out with us on picket duty that evening. It was May the 3rd, 45. And anyway, it took 3 suicides, and this last one, when I was laying there, that's all I could do, look out at that other ship or up at the planes. I looked over there, and one of them suicides just barely, the first one, it just barely missed on the port side. And I guess it made that other one kind of mad, because he just peeled out and stayed about 15 or 20 feet above the ocean, come clear around and hit the fan tail of the ship off to the side. And he opened up them compartments, I'll bet you, almost halfway up that ship. And that thing finally just went down and just kind of quivered and set up like that. And there was the men that was on top side bailed out. The thing it was, when that thing went on down, and didn't take long to do it, the suction brought a lot of them down in there that had bailed off the ship. And it knocked some off too. So while I was pinned down there, I got to see that. Besides them rascals still swarming up there wanting to come in.
Yeah, and then what was the name of the ship that went down?
U.S.S. Little.
U.S.S. Little. And
it was a twin Dar ship.
And how many kamikaze planes hit your ship?
9, I believe it was, and 3 bombs, and it didn't sink us. But this other one took, I believe 3 suicides, and of course each one of them had a bomb on, but the first one missed completely by just a few inches.
Now,
So,
how were the bombs delivered?
Right on the plane. The plane just went in with them.
Okay.
You know, they didn't fly over and drop them like you would think. And they had what they called valves, and Zeke's was twin-engine suicides, and Betty's was twin-engine. Had a few of them. But that was getting along towards the end of the war, and they was running out of material to build much of anything. But I tell you what they did do, they could outfly, our planes off of our carriers. We'd go up there and fight them for a while. Or they'd stay with them, fight them as long as they could, but those valves and Zeeks would come in, and they would be so much more maneuverable that the time our little old squatty planes come off of those carriers, they was fast. By the time they make a turn, they'd have to go up 4 or 5 miles to come back. And them little old Jap planes would just circle and just spot a ship down there and outmaneuver them and head in.
When you saw your first kamikaze coming in, what'd you think?
I didn't think he'd come in. I thought he was going to fly over and drop a bomb and peel out. I'd heard of them, but I didn't figure they'd stay with it. But these son of guns went right on in with it. We found 3 bodies on the ship the next morning.
What,
Yeah, well, it was cut off from here.
Oh, Japanese?
Yeah. The doctor examined it, and he said one of them was a woman. All real young. But those valves and Zeeks, that is a single engine, and when they hit them steel decks, of course, this from here down, the motor just demolished all that. But from here up, there was 3 bodies found.
How many men were killed on your ship?
102 or 3.
And what was the name of your ship again?
U.S.S. Aaron Ward.
Aaron Ward?
Aaron Ward.
Aaron Ward.
Yeah, they made 2 movies about it and wrote 2 books. I got one of them here somewhere. We set the record for the most suicides and bombs in the state afloat. Yeah. I mean, that's counting carriers and cruisers and the whole deal.
Why did the ship stay afloat?
I don't really know. I guess our captain had just maneuvered that rascal. If he'd catch them coming in, they'd pull a port or a right. And they just never did really get a good direct hit like there was one. They knocked all the superstructure off. And the fantail was just a foot out of the water. And if the sea had been rough that night, it'd have went down. But everything was just right to stay afloat.
Is the movie pretty accurate?
Well, pretty well. They kind of shined her up, make it a little more exciting, but it was kind of. It was taken from this fellow named Arnold Lott, was lieutenant commander in Washington, where they keep the records of all ships. And he had a record, of course, of access to all records. So he wrote this book because we set that record for the new suicide.
Now you said you were pinned down under a track.
Part of that mine track, they're only about that wide and about that far off the deck. It's just like a little, when the wheels fit into a kind of an L-shaped deal. Yeah, a bomb hit and some superstructure fell on it. And the leg was pinned in between that track. It smashed the track down. Didn't break my leg, just left a little dent in it. But it was hot. It was fire under me. That was part that was giving me the problem. And I didn't know how long it'd take if somebody come on. Everybody's busy and scared, They didn't have time to, stop to get one person. They had to get to some guns.
How long did you lay there?
I really don't know. It must have been, I don't know. Everything. The whole battle only lasted 54 minutes. And that's one of the records for a sea battle.
Yeah.
And I never knew that before I went and did.
What was the date of that battle? What was the name of the battle?
Name of the battle.
Yeah, today.
I don't know.
What was the date of it?
It was on May the 3rd, 45, I believe. Well, I'm almost sure it is. In the evening. And we went to general quarters, naturally thinking it was a routine because we always had them that time of evening. And those Japanese got pretty smart. They'd take little pieces of tin foil and fly one airplane over and drop tin foil, and it looked like they had 1,000 airplanes. That radar pick up every one of those little tin foil things. So they had a lot of airplanes out that night, but we didn't think it mattered much. We just figured they'd drop in some tinfoil again. And they didn't really have that many planes. I don't know, must have been 15 or 20. And the only reason it quit, it got dark. That was the only reason they didn't finish us off.
And how many ships were sunk in that battle?
U.S.S. Little One destroyer.
That's all there was, one that was sunk?
Well, there's just two of us there together.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. There may have possibly been some other part of the, that area out there. But, well, they was getting one or two a night, every night of those picket ships. And all we're supposed to be doing out there, just with our latest radar equipment, was pick up the planes and radio back to get ready for an air raid. But I guess where they didn't want to fly that far, I guess. They had their suicide pact, or their funeral before they left, and I guess they figured the quicker they got her done, the quicker they got to heaven.
Yeah.
We helped out several of them.
Yeah. After they got you out where you were pinned down, what'd you do?
I got out of there right quick. I don't remember. I tell you what I did do too. I was helping the medic. They had a little old kind of a tube thing with you could pull a cap off, and it's a needle and had this some kind of morphine or painkiller of some kind in there. And we took those and just went around them and had arms. And my best buddy had his mouth and teeth and his nose and that all shrapnel. I just cleaned all that out. And gave him some morphine and took him down in the galley and laid him on the table, and he was out of water. All of our power was off. And we had Cokes. And he was laying there and he was thirsty, so I'd pour Coke in his mouth till he got a mouthful, and he'd take his hand and wave that he had a mouthful, and I'd stop pouring until he swallowed it, and then I'd pour some more in him till he got some moisture in him. He was thirsty. But all the time this was going on, though, all their power finally went out from the bombs and planes. So we didn't get towed in until the next day. Pulled us into Okinawa.
How far out were you?
I don't remember how many miles it was. They come out and towed us back in. And it took half a day, so I don't know how many knots was making. I do remember every time we'd have then they continued raiding every night. We was docked in there at Okinawa, and every evening they'd come for the raid, and then we'd have to get the smoke boats out. You remember seeing them or not? It's small boats, and they had a motor on there that they'd crank up, poured some kind of fuel in it, and it'd just lay a layer of smoke all over that where we was all docked. And I dread the evening coming after going through that other day. I thought, man, them son of a guns, they're going to get me this time. And another thing this skipper told us, we pulled up beside a destroyer tender, and what their job is to repair destroyers that had been hit. And they told us if we couldn't get this fixed, we'd get assigned out to other destroyers that was short of hands. But they told us if we could get the holes fixed in this side of the ship, that we could get it back on one screw to San Diego and then back around to Brooklyn, that we'd stay with the ship. So them fellas, the seamen who worked on this destroyer tender, they'd only work 8 hours. Matter of fact, that's the first time I knew you could weld in the water. Now, I never heard of that before, but they'd lay them big old sides of steel down where the bombs went through, and they'd go down there off this tender and weld all that steel back on there.
What kind of welding torch did they use?
I don't know, but they sure done it.
Magnesium or something?
I have no idea. I can't imagine how they could done it. I still can't really, but it surprised me. I was a young kid. I didn't know anything about anything like that. But anyway, we had some welders on our ship, and whenever they'd work their 8 hours, well, we had our own crew standing by, and they'd work the 16 till they come back on again, because they wanted to go back to the States as bad as any of us, these welders. So I'd stay up at night and fix sandwiches and coffee for them, or whatever it took to keep them busy, if I could do, and we all did that. So the morning we left, we got her all fixed and got the forward fire room and forward engine room where it would work. It was on one screw. We headed out, and darn if we didn't have another air raid. There we was out there by ourselves. They wasn't going to escort us nowhere. We had to get back our own. And I thought, man, I hope we missed this one. But they flew past us over a few miles to one side and headed to the island. And we headed on back into Pearl Harbor and then into San Diego.
How long did it take you to get back to Pearl Harbor?
I don't remember. It's a long time on one screw.
Was the Oklahoma still there at Pearl Harbor, or had it been raised?
I don't imagine.
Or did you go into Battleship Row there?
I don't remember what side of it's where all the Navy ships docked, but I don't remember what side of the island was.
Where were you when they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima? That was in August of '45.
I think we were in Brooklyn. We'd worked our way back to Brooklyn. That's where they was going to repair the ship. The Brooklyn Navy Yard there. And I'm almost sure it was there.
Did you hear about the bomb when it was dropped?
Oh, yeah.
What was your reaction?
I was thinking we should have done that many months earlier, because it put a halt. We could have been still fighting them rascals. They're not only good car builders, they was building airplanes out of cardboard boxes.
That's right.
They would have, and could outmaneuver us on, outfly us with those little old planes. And they were tough fighters. I never fought in the German end of it, but the ones I've talked to, them Germans, they kind of like to live, kind of like we did. But them Japanese didn't care. They just didn't. They would fight till the last man stood. I was glad I didn't have to go on that island that morning. I was glad I slept on that ship.
Where were you in VJ Day?
I was in New York.
Was there a celebration?
Well, we was fixing to come home on a 30-day leave. And I went down to Penn, or the Grand Central Station, to catch a train to Chicago. And I remember every little town we went through, the girls would stop and come in and kiss the soldiers and sailors. That's the main thing I remember.
And so you were going home on leave on VJ Day?
Yeah, the ship was to be repaired there, like I said, in Brooklyn. And they was sent us home for 30 days, and they said just stay there till we notify you to come back. So I was home about 60 days or longer before I got a telegram, to come on back. So I had quite a little vacation.
And you got your discharge?
No, I didn't quite have enough points. I'd made up lots of points being overseas, of course, but I didn't quite have enough, so they sent me to Argentine, Newfoundland. And I looked on the bulletin board there, and I thought it was Argentina. I thought, man, am I going to have me some good duty? Anyway, I went back and found out it was Argentine, Newfoundland, up there in that snow country. I was in charge of the bake shop up there. I'd made first class baker by then, and put me in charge of the bake shop. Pretty good size.
All your duties up there at Newfoundland?
Well, just head of the bakery,
Yes.
Bake shop.
How many men were up there?
We had about 25 sailors. We also had about 70 Newfie men and women working in there. It's a real big bakery. It's a Naval Air Station there. Pretty big station.
Now, was it American or was it Canadian?
No, it's American.
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 And then, when did you get your discharge?
Well, I don't remember what. It was in 45, I believe it was. I know I was fixing to, they was offering seemed like $1,000 and a 30-day leave home, and I went to the administration building to see about re-enlisting. You know, I had such a good deal up there. I headed to the back shop and didn't have to do very much, and had good sailors under me working. So I went over to the administration building. That Navy wave officer over there, she said, "Sailor, do you know how much time you got left?" And I said, "No." She said, "Probably about 7 or 9 days if you want to get out." And I said, "Just forget about that, re-enlisted." So that, whatever that was, is when I don't remember what it was in 45.
And you came back to Woodward?
Yes.
Were you here for the tornado?
Yeah. You know, I was going with Bobby then, my wife, and the night of the tornado, we went out to the Lariat. Used to have, which is the VFW building now, used to have a picture show. They used to show westerns, and I liked them, and we went out there, and when it first hit, the wind was blowing. I thought, gosh, maybe we hadn't ought to go in. But anyway, we pulled up, and it hit and got harder, and it's just parked in a horseshoe shape. And I remember them cars just coming out of there like that. You know, they'd all, of course, was already in the show. So we hadn't gotten out yet, so I told Bobby, I said, we better head this thing into town. And of course, the street that went in, the main street going to Woodward then was 8, you know, sit at night like it would. So there was a Phoenix Welch service station out there, and it had a awning out over it, and I thought, now that would be the place to get. So we get that awning for a while there, and my old car just got lifting and going like that, and lawn chairs and things was flying across in front of us. And then I got to worry about that awning might fall, so I told her, I said, maybe we better slide out from under here and try to head on down the 8th Street into town. And luckily nothing, it lifted the car up a little, but nothing actually hit us. But I seen, like I say, lawn chairs and things, you know, going across, and tree limbs was down, and we got into town. Of course, the buildings, a lot of them was smashed or dumped out in the street. So
Well, coming in on 8th Street, were those buildings damaged?
yeah, the Zenith Gas, I remember the front of it was all just fell out over on cars and smashed them about that 2 foot.
Now, what part of town were you in when it hit?
Well, this would be right about Central Park, around 8th in Oklahoma.
So you were right.
Well, I don't know if that's when it hit or not. I was in, like I say, the wind out there, and I think there was 2 different ones come in. So I was out there, I guess, on part of one, and then down in 8th in Oklahoma when another one hit, or was a hit at me.
Of course, they said the big one was almost a mile in diameter, or over a mile. A big storm cloud.
Well, then I wasn't in it then, because I think it came right across this Field Station Lake, which is right over about a mile or half a mile, and took several feet of water out of it. And this whole hill, I remember right in here, there wasn't a sprig of grass. It was a ½ inch long. It just wiped every tree. This just barren right through here. Of course, there wasn't hardly anything. Well, there was this Lincoln, Highland Park edition back through here was all wiped out. And I was on police force then, so we had to work day and night and kind of help protect people coming in from somewhere else and taking other people's merchandise.
Are there any buildings left standing or any sign of the tornado left today?
Well, they built back about everything, but you can see some of them buildings downtown, like the little drugstore. They had put a new front on it. You can see where they couldn't match the brick, and you can see where it was blowed out, and they put it all back in at the top.
There's no foundations up here or anything?
No, they have. As a matter of fact, made a pretty nice addition out of all this back here since then.
I haven't been back here very much.
So what were your duties after the tornado in the police force? What you did? You said that you helped protect. Did you help carry wounded to the hospital or pick up the dead?
Well, that night, Dad was sheriff here at that time, and we worked in Armstrong Funeral Home. And ambulance and people would bring bodies in, and we'd stack them. We used to have them kind of like cordwood. We must have had 100 in that back garage, almost 100 or better. It was kind of wasn't funny either, but you know, when they blowed out windows downtown, they had some mannequins that blowed out the street, and this one fella brought one. And bodies are heavy, so it took Dad and I both to carry one. You know, they feel just dead weight. And once they backed up, and we had 2 bodies in this ambulance, and we reached to get another one, it just went in the air. So I got, gosh, that's a light one. Unwrapped it there out of a blanket. It was a mannequin out of some store window. But we had them with the body just like cordwood. And we worked there till about, I don't know, about daylight. Well, first we went up to the courthouse and let Dad's prisoners out. And I tell you, they were glad to get out. They were, at that time, the jail was right up on top, and they had that wall around, and that wall had caved in against the jail, and they were scared. Of course, it was probably as safe as far as they could be, because the walls are a foot thick, solid concrete. But they was tickled to death to get out, and then we went on further north about a mile to check on my aunt, and she was dead, and 3 of her daughters. So we got an ambulance down there and helped them. That's how we ended up there at the morgue, helping there. Is when we brought them in with the ambulance, we just stayed there and helped them load
What happened to your aunt?
load her from her house, crossed the street, and hit a big locust tree right in the stomach. She just kind of wrapped around it and fell to the ground.
But her daughters were all right, or did it?
Well, one died and then later in Oklahoma City about a week later, and 2 was dead that night.
Well.
So that's how we happened to end up doing what we could do there at the mortuary. We got an ambulance down there. We just stayed there the rest of the night.
What was the prisoners doing?
Oh, they were screaming. Said Milt is his name. He said, Sheriff, just let us out of here. Said, well, just tell us when to come back. We'll come back. And one of them was a woman.
Well.
And Miss Botenheimer up here at Fort Supply. I remember her not.
No, I don't believe I do.
She was a bootlegger. And that's right. Dad had her up there for. And she was, of course, panicking and worrying about her family too. You know, besides worrying about herself up there. But I think there was 4 prisoners.
Did they all come back?
I really don't know. I don't guess. Probably Dad didn't care whether they did or not anyway. He was.
On the police force, what are some of the interesting cases you handled as a policeman here in Woodward?
Well, back in them days, there wasn't any such thing as dope, or the only thing you do is drink beer and get drunk, and we didn't have a lot of anything that amounted a whole lot. You know, we just arrested drunks and family feud, wife beaters. And I think that bothered me more than anything, was having to go or get called on a family. You know, especially if some old boy get his paycheck and get drunk, go home and whip his wife. So you got to the point where by the time I got one of those calls, I was madder than he was when I got there. So I was going to get sued about twice on 3 different occasions, but I did stop him from beating his wife. They sure never called me anymore.
How'd you stop?
I beat him worse than he beat his wife. Then they was going to sue twice, but they didn't go through with it. Went to one, and this had happened about the 3rd time. It was usually on a Saturday night, and they get the paycheck and go get drunk and come home, and this old boy got mad at her for some reason. He went in the kitchen and got a gallon of Marmalade jelly, walked in the front room, throwed that thing in the middle of the floor, and it sprayed jelly. It wasn't a big room, but it's halfway up the wall everywhere. So she called me. And I knew what it was as soon as we got the call. And she said, take that son of a gun to jail and keep him, or I'm going to kill him. I said, I think I will. So I beat the far out of him. And I shouldn't say that, but anyway, we took him to jail, and the next day she went up there to see how he was, and she didn't like the way he looked too good, so she got her attorney. And the judge called me. I'd worked all night saying I had to get up and go down there. And I told him what the deal was. He said, well, they're going to file charges on him. And I said, well, I guess nothing I can do about it now. But he healed up and got to looking kind of like he had before, and she quit. But that happened another time. But anyway, that was the last time I got a call of him beating his wife. Now I was on her 8 years.
I understand that the lady was killed in the tornado, and she ran the house. The madam.
Oh, man.
Oh, that lived out there?
Yeah. Ever have any dealings with her?
No, I never did. As a matter of fact, I hadn't even heard about her, until I read some books later.
Yeah, so the police didn't have to go out.
No. No, we did. This was probably, she lived to be a pretty elderly lady. I think this had happened lots of years before.
Before you were born.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't have much. Matter of fact, lots of times I was on duty in this whole town by myself, and the only help I could get would be calling an off-duty officer, and you don't have time to do that when you need some. So half from Monday till Thursday, I worked the shift by myself, the midnight to late shift. And the reason that I worked that one is I was starting my store about that time, and I could sleep to about, up in the morning, and I could work out the store to start with. I started my store right down here where this beauty shop is, right there where that station.
Yes,
and I was working on that, trying to get my store started. So that's the reason I worked the night shift. But people back in them days, they kind of had some sense to a degree.
Well, they didn't have the drugs. The drugs is what.
I think that's what's
Ruins
probably
their
done
minds.
more damage to the American people than anything. And, so I sure wouldn't work a shift by myself in this town now
No.
without some backup.
About bootleggers.
We had them, but they were pretty. They had one out east of town, I remember, but you had to be. He wouldn't sell to any kids. Of course, he was breaking the law all the way through, but he never did bother a whole lot. And had one out north of town too.
Now, were they making their own whiskey, or was it being shipped in?
Yeah, they were shipped in somehow or other. We caught one car load, I think 3 cases come in one day. Or we got tipped off, they was bringing it in, so we just waved on them, got them, and throwed them in jail.
Do we have any moonshiners around here?
Not around Woodward. They used to make it around Visay. We picked up, you can tell there's in a fruit jar and just as white as water. And there were some people down there making moonshine. But there wasn't much you could do if they was drunk on the jail and take the whiskey and put it in the cabinet and mark it for evidence if you ever needed it. About once every 2 years, throw the stuff down the sewer.
Why did you open your store?
Well, when I was in Argentine, Newfoundland Navy, we had a lot of time on our hands, so I'd go to a craft shop over there, and I kind of took a liking to tool and leather. And there wasn't anyone there to teach you, but they had books you could read and kind of start. So after I got out of the Navy, I hadn't thought much more about it. And so when I was on police force, I was going with a girl that lived at one that was going with a saddle maker that was down there with Rigger and Roberts Saddlery. So I got acquainted with him, and I told him I used to tool a little bit, and he said, I've got some rodeo trophy saddles I've got to get out for the Elks Rodeo. I wonder if I'd help him. And I said, well, yeah, I'm working at night, so I'll help you as much as I can during the day. And I'd never seen a saddle put together, didn't know anything about one at all. And so anyway, I'd tool the fenders and skirts of these saddles, and he'd show me how to put them together and how to fit them, put a swell cover on, cantle bindings, and cover horns. And that's how I got started in the saddle business. Well, I started thinking about it. I thought, well, now if I, in the meantime, after a while, that him and Roberts broke, Rigger and Roberts broke up, and he went to college over to OSU. So that's when I really thought about getting off the police force and putting in a saddle shop. And at that time, I didn't have any intentions of retailing anything but what I made myself. I stayed there for about 6 or 7 years. I just sold what I could build. You know, we made boots later and made saddles. I made the Miss Rodeo Marcus saddles for 14 years.
You still make boots?
No, we don't even build saddles or don't repair them unless it's one that I built some time in the past.
So your main, and you opened your shop in what year?
Well, I really had a shop back about 52 or 3, but I stayed on police force till July 55 before I got nerve enough to drop that $160 a month job I had and go into business for myself. And I thought I'd made a mistake for a while. A lot of days I'd sit out there and never take in a dime. But I kept busy. I kept building saddles or repairing. And finally, after the drought in the 50s, finally started raining. Well, the farmers started bringing repair work in. And finally got better. Or, well, it had to. It couldn't get any worse. I started this business on $4.75. Never borrowed a dime all these years. And I paid for, I've got about 1,500 acres of land, 10 rent houses, so I've done pretty good. But I've worked a lot of hours too.
When did you get married?
Probably around 50. I've ought to ask Bobby again. I don't. Yeah, she's over there.
How many children do you have?
2.
What are their names?
The oldest one's Justin, and he's married and lives in Houston, and he's in the stockbroking business, or owns his own company. And the youngest one is Temple, and he's going to school at OSU. He graduates next month. And he wants to be a highway patrolman. Spent 4 years in college, and he wants to, well, he's already, well, it's not definite he's going to go, but it's pretty definite. I think they open school in February. So he's going to have a degree, and he wants to get back in police work.
What degree? What is this?
Business, administration, and computers. His brother bought him a computer outfit that, 3 or 4 years ago, and he learned quite a lot from it. In fact, his older brother wants him to come down and help him in the stockbroking business, but he won't like that inside work, so he's going to be a patrolman.
Well, what else? Miss Jennifer?
I can hear all of it, but it sounded mighty good to me. Sounds like you've had a very interesting life.
By golly, it has. It's
And it sounds to me like there was somebody watching out for you.
the fellow upstairs just watched me every day. He just took awful good care of me, especially over there when our ship got hit.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you.
You betcha.